Mirë se erdhët në Public Square, unë jam Ditmir Bushati. Zgjedhjet parlamentare në Gjermani nuk prodhuan një surprizë. Pak a shumë dihej që CDU-ja, e drejtuar nga Friedrich Merz, do të zinte vendin e parë, sikundër dihej gjithashtu që socialdemokratët po kalonin një periudhë të vështirë. Çka bëri që ato të zënë vendin e tretë për herë të parë në histori, që prej themelimit të kësaj partie. Bie në sy fakti që partia ekstremit djathtë dhe partia ekstremit majt kanë shënuar një rezultat më të mirë krahasuar me zgjedhjet e kaluara. Së brendshmi, Gjermania do të vazhdojë të ketë një koalicion të madh, edhe pse koalicioni tradicional i madh mes CDU-CSU-s nga një anë dhe socialdemokratëve nga ana tjetër nuk është më aq i madh për sa i përket votave dhe mbështetjes popullore, si pasojë e dinamikës së re në skenën politike gjermane. Mirëpo Gjermania është vendi me peshën kryesore ekonomike në Bashkimin Evropian, fuqia e tretë për nga ekonomia në botë dhe me një impakt të padiskutueshëm në skenën europiane. Sidomos në kushtet që po përballon kontinenti ynë si pasojë e luftës që vazhdon në Ukrainë. Cila do të jetë politika e qeverisë së re gjermane për Ballkanin Perëndimor? A do të kemi zgjerim të Bashkimit Evropian me vendet e Ballkanit Perëndimor në mandatin e qeverisë së re gjermane? Cili do jetë fokusi i Gjermanisë dhe kancelarit Merz për sa i përket konsolidimit të projektit evropian, në kushtet kur kemi një situatë të re dhe marrëdhënie të reja ndërmjet Shteteve Bashkuara të Amerikës dhe Bashkimit Evropian? A do të ndikojë një mënyrë një tjetër administrata Trump për të nxitur Bashkimin Evropian dhe kësaj Gjermaninë si lokomotiva kryesore e Bashkimit Evropian, për të sqaruar një herë mirë objektivat e projektit evropian dhe për ta konsoliduar atë. Për të gjitha këto, sot do të flas në Public Square me Michael Martens, gazetar me shumë eksperiencë i Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung, i cili mbulon vendet e Europës juglindore. Dear Michael, thank you for being in the Public Square.
And thank you for inviting me.
I would like to start our conversation by asking you a question in relation to the German elections. They are by far the most important elections in Europe. What are the main takeaways?
Well, the results as such were not so surprising. They were more or less what we expected by the polls. The polls had been more or less frozen for weeks and months. We knew CDU, so the conservatives led by Friedrich Merz, would be the strongest party. We knew that the Social Democrats of outgoing Chancellor Oliver Scholz would be losing a lot. So no one really, except of Olaf Scholz, believed that he would be re-elected. And we also knew that the far right, meaning AfD, Alternative for Germany, and probably the far left, Die Linke, would gain a lot. The only thing that was not really clear, because they were like hovering around the 5% threshold, which we have in Germany, was whether the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht would make it into the parliament or not. Sarah Wagenknecht used to be with Die Linke for many years, and then some months ago last year, she founded her own party, but she didn't make it to parliament, which might be more or less the end of her political career. So basically, the results as such were not a surprise, were not that exciting, but now the question is how to move ahead with these results.
How to move ahead with these results?
Unfortunately, Germany always takes a long time for coalition negotiations, partly because it has become a tradition. I'm not sure whether it's a good tradition or not, but it has become a tradition to have huge coalition agreements of sometimes, I think the last coalition agreement had more than 130 pages. Like you have the impression sometimes each aspect of life is being covered in these coalition agreements, which is usually futile, because as soon as those coalitions come into power, you have events that no one has foreseen. And then most of these things that are being that have been discussed and have been written into the coalition agreement become obsolete. whether it's the Greek euro crisis or the euro crisis and the Greek financial crisis, whether it's COVID, whether it's the pandemics, whether it's now the war in Russia and Ukraine. Each government was faced, like everywhere in the world, with events and with tasks that had not been foreseen while the coalition negotiations went on. But we might have another long coalition talk now. Friedrich Merz, the possible or potential next chancellor, has said he hopes to finish those coalition talks around Easter, which I think is the 20th of April or something.
How do you see the influence of Elon Musk in the German elections and the rise of AfD?
Not as big. He did directly support AfD. He was taking part via video link in their party conventions. He had an interview with or a dialogue with Alice Weidel. The only thing that I find important about Musk in Germany is that some people still do not understand Musk does not support AfD because it is AfD. He supports AfD because he, in any country in Europe, supports the party or the political force that gives him the best chances to destroy and undermine the European Union, which is the American project right now.
And what does it mean for you as a journalist, having SPD for the first time in history in the third place?
Well, it means, for example, but not only for me as a journalist, but for anyone who observes politics, the so-called grand coalition is not that grand anymore. I mean, we had coalitions of SPD and CDU before, and then really they had a huge majority. The SPD and the CDU, the Conservatives and the Social Democrats, agreed just some days ago on an investment package of 500 billion euros for infrastructure and weapons. I mean, support for the German army, and even together, Social Democrats and CDU, the Conservatives, do not have the necessary majority for changing the constitution, because this is what they have to do to lower or to change the so-called debt brake in order to do what they plan. And they need the support of a third party, which is the Green Party in parliament. So to put it in one word, the lesson is grand coalitions are not grand coalitions anymore, because even the formerly biggest party, okay, CDU still is the biggest party, but even the two parties which have dominated post-war German history together, while still they have a majority, don't have a huge majority anymore.
Agreeing on a debt brake, does it mean that the next government will be a social democratic government, no matter who is running the government, or is Germany shifting to a war economy mode? So what's your take?
It's definitely not shifting to a war economy. That's far from what anyone could do right now. It should be, I guess, but it's not happening. The Social Democrats have had their success in removing or in planning to remove the debt brake, because this is what they had been wanting to. By the way, Friedrich Merz in the election campaign has always said this is not going to happen. So people now accuse him of having lied his way to power, because the first thing he did after coming to power was doing what he claimed in the election campaign he would never do, reforming the debt brake. As you know, there have been coalitions, grand coalitions, as at the time they were still called justifiably, between CDU and SPD before, when Merkel was chancellor. These were always coalitions where the Social Democrats had a lot of influence. You could really see their handwritings in those coalitions, which didn't always help them, because Merkel was very talented in taking away potential topics from them. But now it's a different constellation, because definitely Friedrich Merz is not Merkel. He made his career by distancing himself from Merkel and her style of doing politics, which is, by the way, the reason why certain Social Democrats have problems with him.
When it comes to the foreign and security policy of Germany, I mean, after the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Chancellor Scholz had this famous speech where he was speaking about Zeitenwende. Now we have Friedrich Merz speaking about the epochal shift. And we knew that he was a committed Atlanticist, but now he's speaking about the security of Europe, and to me he's speaking more in the terms of Charles de Gaulle. How to understand the new government of Germany when it comes to the European security environment and to the contribution for the European security environment? What's your take?
I mean, the Zeitenwende, which you mentioned, was a speech was used in a speech by Olaf Scholz just, I don't know, 2 or 3 days or maybe a week after the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it ended up in a huge disappointment because it was only a declaration in nature. It has never been, Scholz never has backed it up. I think he was the worst possible chancellor at the worst possible time in that office. Definitely for Ukraine, but also for Germany. They sometimes say about the former Social Democratic Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, he was a great chancellor in a small time. And here we had, as far as Scholz is concerned, I think a small chancellor in a big time, which is not a good combination. But about the possible potential future government, I do have the impression that some of them understood that we are in a different time. Business as usual is not an option anymore, which was very convenient for Germany, the business of usual of the 70s, of the 80s, of the 90s, of the 2010s. But is this really, my problem is a little bit the Social Democratic Party. Do we have a majority that has understood that the militarization of foreign policy, unfortunately, is a must for Germany and for Europe? I'm not quite sure whether this has actually sunk in.
And where do you see the role of Germany in this respect? Because we are used to see Germany in the driving seat in Europe and to be very much present in different initiatives. So we have seen during the Minsk I and Minsk II, in the Normandy format for the Russian-Ukrainian talks. We have seen Germany in the driving seat when it comes to the enlargement of the eastern part of Europe during cold times, but also during Schroeder's time. But with the Merkel era and also with Scholz, my impression is that we have seen more tacticism rather than strategic thinking and strategic actions. What's your thinking on that?
Well, first of all, one thing I think that's important to note is that the Merkel years were years of strong economic performance by Germany. We did have a recession when everyone had it after the Lehman Brothers crisis in the US, but Germany had a very strong rebound then of, I think, plus 4% of economic growth. And then for years, it was really a very robust economy, very robust growth. And this is over for the time being and maybe for a longer while, unless Germany manages to reinvent itself and unlock new potentials, because the old situation is gone, which rested basically on 3 pillars. Pillar 1, our car industry was producing the best cars in the world. We were selling them to China and to the rest of the world very successfully. Now, with the change to electrical cars, this is not true anymore. Germany is not dominating the market as it is for traditional cars. Secondly, the Americans paid for our security, so we could invest the money that we did not spend on security. We could invest on generous, benevolent welfare plans and higher pensions each year and new social programs. But these times are over as well, obviously. And these pillars are not there anymore. I don't see, I don't think, Germany is now on the edge of the abyss, but there is still a strong economy. It's still, I think, the 3rd biggest of the world, if I'm not mistaken. So it's still there, but there's no such thing anymore as the guarantee for current growth. And if we cannot back up this new policy that is necessary now by a robust economy, then we will have other problems. The French, as far as I'm being told by experts, simply don't have the financial means to be a strong actor militarily right now. And this is, of course, important for the entire Eurozone. We must come back to growth models, to robust growth models, in order to finance what we have to finance to withstand Russia.
Do you think that Trump administration will somehow trigger Germany and the others also to clarify the finality of the European project?
I personally do not believe in political enlargement anymore for quite a while, for two reasons. First of all, I don't believe it's going to happen. And secondly, I'm not sure whether it's a good idea, because I do not see the European Union reforming itself. And if it doesn't, I don't see how the European Union could take in new members with a veto right. It's not about the size. We all know the economies and the population. I mean, these are 6 very small states. Even Serbia is not a big country by European standards, let alone the others. But the question is, even the smallest and tiniest new member has a veto right, and we see small members like Cyprus or Hungary, which is also not a big, huge state to begin with I think 10 million inhabitants, can cause quite a havoc by using its right to veto. And maybe what I would like to highlight is I just returned from Berlin, and in Berlin I got hold of a research paper, or it's called the discussion paper of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation. This is an internal discussion paper which was never published, but it was written last year. It's not dated, but you can, let's say, deduct or conclude that it was written last year. And there is one sentence that says that a European Union that takes in members with non-resilient democracies, which are very, very easily to influence by the outside, might end up weaker than a European Union that leaves those Western Balkan states outside. On the other hand, the authors of this study are very clear in saying we must make a credible offer to the Western Balkans if we want to have them close to us. And I think the European interest, the interest of the European Union, is to have a cordon sanitaire of well-governed, democratic, stable states. Stable, not stabilocracy, but stable democracies. And the authors have a very, very, very good way of phrasing this. We all know this famous song by Frank Sinatra, or it's not his song, but the most famous interpretation is by him, New York, New York, Frank Sinatra. Mm-hmm. And there's this one line where he says, where he sings, "If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere." Mm-hmm. And the authors of this paper by the Friedrich Ebert Foundation turn this upside down, saying, if you can't make it there, meaning the Balkans, you can't make it anywhere. And I think this is a really good way to put it. The European Union wants to be taken serious on a world stage. I think it deserves to be taken serious. But if it wants to be taken serious, it has to show that it can do its homework. And I would consider the Western Balkans the homework of the European Union. How can you dare to say we can compete with China or the United States? I'm not even talking about military terms where we are light years away, but even economically and politically as an actor, if you cannot even be a guiding force and a crucial force in the Western Balkans. Personally, since I've lost belief in political enlargement, I think the single market with its 4 freedoms is a potential way out. Because imagine, let's say, Albania being member of the single market. You would not even notice in daily life that you are not a political member of the European Union, because economically, from terms of point of view of rights, it would be absolutely as if you were a member of the European Union. Opening a company in France would be as if you open it in Paris or Berlin. It would be just the same, with one exception. Albania would not have a veto right in the European Union. It would not have its own commissioner, and Albanians wouldn't take part in European elections. But I think for the people, as long as there's progress, that is not the most important idea. And for me, still, this is the most convincing idea that has been around, because political enlargement, I think, is just not on the table. And everyone who says the contrary, I think, is just not honest.
Do you think that Western Balkans is closer to European Union in terms of democracy and rule of law, in terms of economic development? When you compare the region with 5 years ago or before the war in Ukraine, what's your opinion?
I think Serbia definitely is not closer to the European Union. It's still a candidate for European Union membership, but this is not taken serious on both sides of the table, and not in the European Union and not in Serbia itself. The European Commission now, as you for sure notice, agree, is trying very much to declare Montenegro to be the new front runner. I'm not so sure whether this is really the case. And it's again the question: front runner to where? If you're a front runner to Nirvana, you haven't gained much.
And when it comes to the German foreign policy in the Balkans, how do you see it? I mean, if I ask you to make a comparison between Merkel, Scholz, and a possible Merz government?
I know some people who from the CDU who really have, I think, a very realistic picture from the Western Balkans, of the Western Balkans. They know the region, and they, I think, also know what should be done, but that doesn't mean that they will actually determine the Western Balkan policy of the region. In the Merkel years, I don't know whether you read the memoirs of Angela Merkel. I wouldn't recommend it because they're very boring, but I did it. And I can tell you that there is a small chapter about the Western Balkans, but it's very short, and you could see that from my interpretation, she included it because she kind of knew when I talk about the entire world, I cannot, not talk about the Western Balkans, but there's very little substance. It's basically as if you take a Wikipedia article and paraphrase it and then just insert it into your book. Interestingly, none of the leaders of the Western Balkans, except of one actually, no, two, are mentioned. She doesn't mention Edi Rama. She doesn't mention Alexander Vucic. She doesn't mention, okay, this is not Western Balkans, but Balkans. She doesn't mention Boyko Borisov. She mentions no one except for two exceptions. One is Zoran Zaev, because she praises him and Alexis Tsipras for having solved the name question. And the other is a dead politician, Slobodan Milosevic, as an example of how politics should not be done. This is it. So basically, this chapter, it's not even a chapter, it's a sub-chapter in her memoirs, illustrates, I think, more or less the German approach to the Western Balkans. It's like not on the agenda very high. No one really, very few people really care. And what I find is a pity about this, and this is something else that is being highlighted in the paper by the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, is, no one waits for us in Germany to say something, let's say in India or China. We are dwarfed by the international standards. But in the Balkans, in the Western Balkans, we could really do something. We could exert influence if we really meant serious business, if we made a real credible offer. But we are not doing that. And because of that, people do not take Germany serious in the Western Balkans for reasons which I can only understand. And one more example, after what happened to Kosovo last year, with regard to the Council of Europe, I wouldn't blame it on anyone, any Western Balkans leader, not to trust the German government anymore. Remember what happened. Kosovo fulfilled all the criteria for being taken into the Council of Europe. This was confirmed even by Dora Bakoyanni, the former foreign minister of Greece, who is from a country that does not even recognize Kosovo, who is from a party that is on the right wing spectrum of the parties, not left wing like Vetvendosia. But even Mrs. Bakoyanni said in her report, now Kosovo should be taken into the Council of Europe. And I think 83% of the parliamentarians of the Council of Europe said the same. But still, Germany and France decided not to do it, to undermine it, which I think is one of the biggest mistakes of German Balkan policy in 2024, in a collection of a lot of mistakes. And of course, now, if I was an advisor, I'm not, and I'm not inspiring to, but if I was an advisor of a politician in the Western Balkans, I would say, don't trust Berlin because they are not keeping their words. I mean, that's unfortunately my reading of the situation.
Whom to trust if not Berlin?
Yourself.
Thank you very much, Michel. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for your questions.